want to start with Union Minister for Civil Aviation, Jyotiraditya Scindia, who's joining us on this broadcast. Minister Scindia, welcome. Can you at the outset give our viewers a sense of what to expect from your ministry, Civil Aviation, in the year to come? What is it that's on the verge of takeoff, landing and delivery? What should viewers really look out for from Minister Scindia this year?
Well, Rahul, thank you for having me on the show. Before I do that, I think just to give you a little bit of an overview and through you, our viewers as well, in terms of this budget. As we all know that this was a vote on account budget. But at the same time, if you call it interim, then it's also an innovative budget and it's an inclusive budget. It very clearly shows the historical path that Prime Minister Modi's government has followed over the last 9.5, 10 years, where there's been a complete transformation of the economic landscape of India. And when I talk about economic landscape, I'm not talking about just the manufacturing sector or the service sector or the agrarian sector, but really down to the grassroots level. When we talk about the fact that 25 crore people have now come above the poverty line, when we talk about close to 34 lakh crores being transmitted through the DBT program directly to people's bank accounts with no leakages, saving of close to 2.7 lakh crore of government reserves in that process by the creation of 50 crore Jan Dhan accounts. So therefore, there's been a transformation both in terms of the delivery system under Prime Minister Modi and a transformation of lives across the length and breadth of our country. When we talk about minimum government and maximum governance, that's what we intend and that's what we mean. And now we are on the path of 100% saturation. And therefore, all the schemes of the government of India must reach the last mile, last connectivity. And therefore, now if you transition on to my both my ministries, Civil Aviation as well as Steel, what we are looking at is a rapid rollout of infrastructure. In Civil Aviation, as we speak today, Rahul, I have close to about 6 to 8 terminals that are ready for inauguration. Whether we talk about Pune, we talk about Kolhapur, on the back of Ayodhya, which was just done, and Tiruchirappalli, which was just done last month. Pune, Kolhapur, Jabalpur, Gwalior, Lucknow, the Big Bang terminal coming up in Delhi by the end of February, which will take our capacity to 109 million, second largest terminal in the world. That's where India is reaching today. And similarly in steel, augmentation of steel capacity. We've gone from 80 million tons production to 125 million tons, close to about 100 million tons in terms of capacity to 160 million tons, going up to 300 million tons by 2030. And therefore, we are committed down the path. I couldn't help overhearing our panelist before I joined in officially, talking about the PLI scheme. I'd like to just inform him that as far as the PLI schemes are concerned, they have resulted in transformational change across industry verticals in India. I can only talk about the 2 PLI schemes under my remit, one under Civil Aviation, where we have already dispersed close to about 40% of our budgetary amount over 3 years in year 1. Close to about 40 crores to 50 crores of 115 crore resource envelope. And we've asked already for a expansion of that PLI for drones. Secondly, in steel as well, the PLI scheme was announced just a couple of months ago. We've had 27 companies with 57 MOUs that have been announced. Roughly a resource envelope of about close to 2,500-3,000 crores. I'm following each one of those private sector expansion plans in the specialty steel sector personally on a monthly basis. They're pretty much on track, and we're looking at an augmentation of almost about 20 to 25 million tons per annum in terms of steel capacity, only and only due to the PLI schemes. It has worked wonderfully in electronics, in telecom, and multiple other sectors. So I think it's important that when we look at schemes, there are two ways of looking at them. One is the huge fillip that it may have given that sector. Surely there's much more that we can do, but whether it's semiconductors, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's drones, whether it's specialty steel, we're now looking at VAS. We're looking at value-added manufacturing, value-added services, which was never the case in India. We were more of a commodity-producing country that would sell commodities at their base price. Now we're looking at value-added, where the margin becomes much higher on a global scale.
Minister, how do you respond to the critique, especially from the Congress party, that while public infrastructure spends are going up, spends on social sector, spends on education, spends on healthcare as a percentage of GDP relative to the past have actually come down, that these somehow, just by actual allocation, aren't as important as they used to be in the past? There it is on your screen, both education and healthcare now getting much less percentage of GDP allocation than in the past.
So I think that those who have never seen transformation on this scale, those that have always talked about 100 rupees being remitted from Delhi and only 15 rupees ending up in the Labharti's account, are the last ones that can talk about efficacy or allocation. The very fact that today you're seeing, if you look across schemes, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi affecting 11 crore 80 lakh farmers, close to about 2.8 lakh crores being transferred straight directly into their bank accounts. Ujjwala Yojana affecting 10 crore women. When you talk about Ayushman card, almost about 28 crore today Labhartis of Ayushman card, 77,000 crores being spent over the last 9.5 years. Where were these kind of numbers during their time and their period? You talked about outlays, but you never talked about outcomes. And the finance minister very clearly in her budget has said that we are not an outlay-driven budgetary system. We're an outcome-driven. And those outcomes today, Rahul, are in front of you. When we talk about the fact that you talk about PM Awas Yojana, we built close to about 3 crore houses in 65 years. We've now built 4 crore houses in the last 10 years, and we've committed to building another 2 crore houses over the next 5 years. Those are the kind of targets that we are looking at. And that is why there is trust and belief in Modi ki guarantee. Because people of India today know that when Prime Minister Modi gives a guarantee, then that's a guarantee that guarantee of PM Modi is going to be fulfilled. And you're seeing translation of that. We have never seen these numbers before. President Macron, on his recent visit to India, was fascinated by the fact that in Jaipur and near Hawa Mahal, when the Prime Minister went and bought a cup of tea for him on his mobile system and on the basis of Chai Pe Charcha and on the basis of the UPI system, where immediately a payment was done through the mobile system. And now he's asked for that technology to be taken to France. We never manufactured COVID vaccines before. We had 2 vaccines manufactured in India, and we were transporting it to 110 countries through Vaccine 3. This is a new India. It's a new India that unfortunately the opposition cannot stomach or come to terms with. But it is a new India that has today risen from an aspirational desire of every Indian to really onto the world stage.
But Minister Scindia, your former colleague,
India, the formidable India that Prime Minister Modi represents.
Ex-Finance Minister P. Chidambaram was with us a short while ago, and he said, look at growth 10 years under UPA, look at growth 10 years under NDA. He says, look at where I left the fiscal deficit, look at where the fiscal deficit is now. The accusation is that the BJP government overplays everything that's happening on their watch and completely dismisses any growth that may have happened in the watch of other governments.
Mr. Chidambaram is a very accomplished Harvard lawyer. It's difficult to constantly argue with him, but if I may be in trying to be in all my humility, I've had a background of being a Harvard economist. Sorry?
I'm saying you can't critique Harvard since you studied there as well. But go on.
I just said that. I said that if I can humbly submit that I'm a Harvard economist. So therefore the problem with Mr. Chidambaram is that he looks at fiscal deficit numbers and he forgets economic theory. And economic theory tells you, whether you look at Keynesian theory or otherwise, that fiscal deficit in itself is not a bad thing, as long as you are spending today on capital expenditure that will yield results tomorrow. And that's what's happened under this government. From a 3 lakh crore capex program of the UPA, you've now ended up at 10 lakh crore capex program for this year, going to 11,111 crores for next year. The country has never seen this kind of public investment in its history of 75 years. And therefore, this CAGR of public investment is what is powering today private investment to come in as well. Because private investment understands that the government is putting its foot forward, whether it's highways, whether it's ports, whether it's airports, whether it's railways, whether it's telecom. And therefore, it's ushering in private investment. One of the major issues we have in our country, thanks to the last 65 years of their government, is high logistic costs. Our logistics costs are close to about 12%. And today, our imperative under Prime Minister Modi, his Gati Shakti program, is to be able to lower logistics costs down to 6 to 7%. And therefore, this huge spend on metros, on highways, because we have to get integration of India, we have to get goods from one end to the other. We've got to be able to export. We've got to be able to import raw material, take it to our factories. That's the whole prerogative. And unfortunately, the Congress is still caught up in a time warp of fiscal deficit logic, which doesn't apply to the current government model of spending on infrastructure, as opposed to their deficit numbers that were implied completely by expenditure on the revenue account. And many hidden subsidies that were never displayed on their deficit numbers, such as the oil subsidies. And that has become completely transparent and accountable today. We've taken it on the chin and showed it in our first 2 years, almost about 8 years ago.
Now, you've been focusing a lot on regional connectivity through the Udaan Scheme, Minister. And anecdotally, it seems that while some of these new airports are readied, initially we have a flurry of flights on those smaller airports. After a while, for various reasons, and I want to draw you out on this, those flights seem to cease. And then they say, हाँ अभी होगा, अभी तो नहीं है. Is that something that is concerning you, that you get these new airports going? I don't name any 1 or 2 particular airports, but anecdotally and from people who have spoken to, this seems to have happened in a few places. How do you ensure that these new regional airports that you're building actually have regular, assured connectivity and not in fits and spurts?
So, Rahul, I'd love to spend a session on this with you alone. There is so much of concoction of facts that is going on with this argument that, again, the opposition is laying out. Almost about, if I recall correctly, 8 or 10 months ago, I rebutted all of the points that had been put across. We have built 76 airports, heliports, and waterdrones under the Udaan Scheme. All 76 were connected. Of the 76, we've had close to 519, because I inaugurated Dehradun-Pithoragarh yesterday with a 19-seater plane, which the CM himself flew in to Pithoragarh. 519 routes that have been operationalized. Under Udaan, you have a viability gap funding model for 3 years. It's a limited period with a sunset clause. If there wasn't a sunset clause, you'd be critiquing me for that. So there is a sunset clause. But I'm very glad to report to you that even post the sunset clause, close to about 30% of the routes are now still flying, which means what? That you build an airport where there was never an airport, or if there was one, it was prior to World War II. You then seed a flight with the viability gap funding. You then start getting anchor customers in terms of people who fly. Over a 3-year period, it then becomes sustainable on its own, and it still carries on. Almost 80 to 85% of our airports that were built under Udaan are still fully connected through either flights that are carrying on over their 3-year period, or those that have completed their 3-year period but are viable in their own right. And many airports are connected now with not only your big ATR and your Boeing 737 and Airbus 320, but I've, as you know, looked at a new Udaan schemes squarely and fairly only for helicopters and only for small planes. And by small planes, I mean sub 20-seater planes. So therefore, cities like Jamshedpur, cities like some cities like in Orissa, Pithoragarh and Dehradun, I've connected with 19-seater planes, because I'm also looking now at last mile connectivity in a hub and spoke model. And therefore, the demand for civil aviation is growing at a huge double-digit CAGR. We had 6 crore flyers in 2014. Pre-COVID, we had 14.5 crore flyers. Last year, I closed at 15.2 crore flyers. And I'm forecasting that by 2030, we will have 30 crore domestic flyers in this country. That's the kind of scale that you're looking at, which is why now you're building bigger metro airports. Goa was the first city where you had double airports. Now you're going to have Mumbai with Navi Mumbai. You're going to have Delhi with Jewar coming up. Delhi airport itself will be the second largest airport in the world. So while you're creating the big hubs, you're also creating all the spokes, going off into a Pithoragarh, into a Jamshedpur, into a Jharsuguda, into a Roopsi in Assam, into a Kishangarh in Rajasthan, into a Darbhanga. So that's the model that we are creating as we go forward.
Okay, we leave it over there. It's an aggressive plan, and we wish you all the best for the rollout. Thank you very much, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this interim budget.